Hi, I'm Rachel Walling, Preservation Planner with the City of Columbia Planning and Development Services.
And I'm Megan McNish. I'm also a preservation planner with the City of Columbia.
Since we're limiting in-person meetings at the moment due to the current health crisis, we put together some videos of some topics and frequently asked questions for you guys just as an additional resource during this time. So this is part 3 of the Bailey Bill. We have part 1, which discusses a little bit about what the Bailey Bill is, just some basic information, as well as part 2, which talks through the application process for the Bailey Bill. So in this video, we're going to talk through part B, which is final certification for the Bailey Bill.
So in order to start our discussion, I think it's most prudent to explain what final certification is and what part B is. Part B is the application you submit when you've met your investment threshold that's required as a part of the Bailey Bill. When you submit the Part B application, your project does not need to be complete, so you don't need to be finished with all of the work, but you must have met the investment threshold, and this has to occur within that first 2-year period after preliminary certification. This is really critical for you to keep the Bailey Bill as an incentive. That 2-year period is a part of the ordinance language for the Bailey Bill, so it's not something we can really grant an exception, or an extension on. Final certification, on the other hand, is the official seal of approval that your project is completed and that you've met the investment threshold to keep the Bailey Bill for the duration of the 20-year period. Again, this is only issued when the project is entirely complete. So for a lot of our residential projects, these two items go hand in hand, but for some projects, they don't. We routinely have commercial projects that take a lot longer than that first 2-year investment period, but again, they need to have met that investment threshold within those first 2 years.
So this is the Part B form. This is what, once you've completed the work, met the investment threshold, either one, or within, close to that 2-year period, we'll reach out, you can reach out whichever way. We'll send you this Part B form. And this is to give us some basic information about completion of the project, as well as your final invoices that will be sent to us. So on this form, pretty straightforward property information. What is the property that the Bailey that you're applying Part B for final certification. In the project completion date, that is, if you've completed the project at this point, or expected April 2022, if not, just when that project is going to be complete, as far as final project costs. This can be for the Bailey Bill, just including your Bailey Bill expenses, or you can share with us your total investment that you've put into your property. We've gotten it both ways, and either way is fine, because some of the most important parts are going to be the attachments. And the most important of those is the itemized invoices indicating the qualified rehabilitation expenses. So you do not have to send us every invoice, every receipt that you have, but you need to send us invoices showing the qualifying rehabilitation expenses that together meet the investment threshold, that 20% of your building value. We need to see what the work is and what you paid for it. So that's why it's really important that they are itemized. It cannot be a lump sum. We need to know, breaking out what part of the invoice is for what part of the project, to make sure that everything meets the requirements of the Bailey Bill. So that'll be very important attachment to send with your Part B form. Again, this can be digital format. We always like digital format. It's a lot easier for us to manage. And so if you just send us copies of the information that you have, we can talk through if we need additional information to clarify any of your items. And photographs are going to be really important. You don't need to show us your new electrical box. That's fine. If you have that in your invoices, we know the work was done. We can count that. That's totally fine. But what it is going to be important is if you're doing, exterior renovations, you're repairing those windows. We want to see how that turned out, what that looks like. Especially right now, if we're not able to get out to the site, we're not doing in-person visits, having those photos to show kind of the after, as you've sent us the before already, is going to be really important to make sure that we see the work that was done, and can make sure that that everything was done according to the Baileyville standards. And then owner information, obviously just your information. Again, this can be scanned in, or you can do an electronic signature. We will accept either type at this point.
To circle back just briefly on what you mentioned about project costs, if you include your total project cost, if you feel comfortable sharing that information with us, it is helpful for us to see how much property owners are spending overall, in addition to whatever they're spending as a part of their Baileyville project. So if you feel comfortable sharing that information with us, we always appreciate it, but certainly not something you have to do. Now I think we're going to jump into some good examples of invoices, what those look like in order to, what property owners submitted in order to meet the investment threshold. So this is an example of a Terminix invoice that was submitted. This property owner has showed us that there's a paid stamp on here, and they've also circled the amount that was spent as a part of this bill. So this is really helpful for us to very quickly identify that the invoice is itemized and exactly the amount that was spent.
In this particular case, the property owner informed me during the course of the renovations that they found a lot of termite damage. So we knew that was going to be a kind of hefty sum that they were going to have to invest to mitigate some of those issues. Also would point out that the invoice includes the date. The date is going to be important too, because we need to make sure it's within that 2-year period. So just a couple other things to note.
Yeah, and one thing we also get from property owners on occasion is shown here. These two separate instances where property owners have listed out whether it's, generally what they've spent on each item, or a totally itemized list of invoices and expenses. And again, this can help us very quickly assess the invoices that you send to us and confirm that you've met the investment threshold. You certainly don't need to go into quite the level of detail that's shown on these two itemized lists. But as Rachel said, that first invoice really shows us, again, with the date, what they've listed out with the scope, and having those paid stamps, and also the cost circled. Those are some really good examples of invoices that have shown us very quickly what we need to know.
Yeah, and I would say too about the itemized lists that are provided by the owners. They're very helpful to us. It makes our job easier. We certainly appreciate it. But those need to be submitted in conjunction with the invoices. So in one of those cases you saw, it was a very long list. They had a lot of invoices to sort through. So that gives us kind of quick look, as long as confirmation in the invoice that those payments were there, of what you're spending, so we can see it all kind of as a group, and not have to do too much math in our heads.
So what are some other things you should know about the Bailey bill? First and foremost is that it can be transferred with the sale of the property if that occurs within the first 20 years, or within the 20 years of the abatement period. All we ask in those instances is that you share the information of the new property owner with us. We want to be in touch with them and talk through the requirements of the program with them, so we can be sure that they're going to continue to enjoy the benefits of the Bailey bill for the rest of the abatement period. The next thing is when the abatement period begins. That 20-year period starts at the time of preliminary certification. So the day that you get the rubber stamp of approval from DDRC is the day that that's going to start. It doesn't start with Part B or with final certification. So just make sure you're aware of, when you got preliminary certifications, you can plan appropriately, for your taxes in the future. The next thing is something we've already mentioned, but I think is really critical. You have to meet the investment threshold within the first 2-year period that we've discussed. This is a part of the ordinance language for the Bailey bill, so it's really critical that you meet that deadline. That's not something we can really give you an extension on, so just make sure you're planning appropriately. And then the last thing is make sure you keep copies of all of the correspondence that's sent to you as a part of the Bailey bill. On occasion, there's some clerical errors. There are a lot of moving pieces and parts to the Bailey bill program kind of behind the scenes, both in our office and at Richland County. So every once in a while, there are errors that happen. So just make sure you have copies of those things just in the event that something comes up. We also keep copies of the correspondence that's sent to you, and we can reshare that information in the event that it gets lost somewhere in the shuffle, but it's just always a good idea to make sure you have these things on hand.
All right, so we hope you enjoyed part 3 of the Bailey bill. And if you joined us for part 1 and part 2, hope you have a better understanding of what the Bailey bill is and the ins and outs. It's a great preservation incentive, so we hope you found that information interesting. So we're going to continue to do videos, so please stay in touch, preservation@columbiasc.gov if you have any questions or comments. If you have any ideas for any videos, any topics you would like us to cover, please let us know. So thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you soon.